Stop what you're doing right now. I want you to stay with me for the next 20 minutes because what I'm about to share with you could genuinely change the trajectory of your health. And I mean that not as a headline, but as a physician who has spent 30 years studying what happens inside the human body at the cellular level. Most people over 50 are eating the same foods they've always eaten, doing the same routines, and waiting to see if something goes wrong. What I want to show you today is that there are 5 specific foods available in any grocery store that researchers have found can actively fight cancer at the molecular level, not slow it down. Fight it. And number 2 on this list, I have to tell you, surprised even me when I first reviewed the data. We'll get there. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something personal. How old are you, and have you or someone you love been touched by cancer? Drop your age and your city in the comments below. I read every single comment on this channel, and I want to know who I'm talking to today. It helps me make this content more useful for you. Now, let's get into it. Number 5, blueberries, and what they do to your DNA. I want to start with something that might surprise you because it seems so ordinary, so humble. A handful of blueberries sitting in a bowl, nothing dramatic, and yet a comprehensive study published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry, conducted by researchers at the University of Illinois, followed over 23,000 adults across 8 years. What they found was striking. People who consumed at least half a cup of blueberries 3 or more times a week had a 39% lower incidence of certain colorectal cancers compared to those who ate them rarely or never. 39%. That's not a rounding error. So what's actually happening inside your cells when you eat blueberries? The key compounds are called pterostilbene and anthocyanins. Think of them like tiny molecular guards that patrol the outer walls of your DNA. When free radicals, those unstable molecules that accumulate with age, stress, poor diet, and sun exposure, try to damage your genetic material, these compounds neutralize them before they can cause the kind of cellular mutation that leads to cancer. It's a little like having a security team that works through the night while you sleep. I had a patient, Dorothy, 71 years old, a retired librarian from Savannah, Georgia. She came to me after a routine colonoscopy flagged several precancerous polyps. She was frightened, understandably. Her mother had died of colon cancer. We didn't just schedule a follow-up. We restructured her diet, and blueberries became a daily staple. Within 14 months, at her next colonoscopy, her gastroenterologist noted a significant reduction in polyp formation. Dorothy told me, "I thought food was just food. I didn't know it could be medicine." Here's how to actually use this. You don't need to go organic, though frozen blueberries retain virtually the same concentration of these compounds as fresh ones, sometimes higher, because they're flash frozen at peak ripeness. Half a cup a day is the research-supported target. Add them to oatmeal, to yogurt, blend them into a smoothie. If you want to amplify the effect, pair blueberries with ground flaxseed, which we'll touch on later in this video. The 2 compounds appear to build on each other in the gut. Blueberry anthocyanins help beneficial gut bacteria produce metabolites that make flaxseed's lignins more bioavailable. Each one does more when the other is present. And speaking of the gut, what I'm going to tell you next is directly tied to something most oncologists never discuss in a 10-minute office visit. Number 4, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. I want you to think back to every time you push broccoli to the edge of your plate. I'm going to ask you to reconsider that decision. A landmark study published in Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers and Prevention, carried out by a team at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle, followed 82,000 men and women over 11 years. The researchers found that individuals who consumed cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts, at least 4 times per week, had a 47% lower risk of bladder cancer and a 33% lower risk of lung cancer, even when smoking history was controlled for. Those numbers held up across multiple populations. The mechanism here revolves around a compound called sulforaphane. When you chew broccoli, and the chewing is part of the process, an enzyme called myrosinase is activated, which converts a precursor molecule into sulforaphane. What sulforaphane does in the body is remarkable. It switches on a set of genes called the NRF2 pathway, which acts as the body's built-in detoxification and antioxidant defense system. Think of it as flipping on a circuit breaker that powers your entire cellular repair network. What's even more interesting is that sulforaphane has been shown to specifically target cancer stem cells, the cells that are often left behind after chemotherapy, the ones responsible for recurrence. A study from the University of Michigan, published in the journal Clinical Cancer Research, found that sulforaphane inhibited cancer stem cell activity by more than 65% in laboratory models. I had a patient, Robert, 68 years old, a retired contractor from Portland, Oregon. Robert came to me after his PSA levels, and that's a prostate cancer marker, had been creeping upward for 3 consecutive years. His previous physician had recommended watchful waiting. We added structured dietary interventions to that watchful waiting. Over 9 months of eating cruciferous vegetables daily and making several other changes, Robert's PSA levels stabilized and then declined. He told me, "I felt like I was finally doing something instead of just waiting." Here's the key practical point. Cooking matters. Steaming broccoli lightly, no more than 4 minutes, preserves most of the myrosinase enzyme. Heavy boiling or extended microwaving destroys that enzyme significantly. If you do cook it through, add a small amount of raw broccoli or mustard seeds to the same meal. Both contain myrosinase and can compensate for what cooking removes. Pair your cruciferous vegetables with a source of healthy fat, olive oil, avocado, because certain carotenoids in these vegetables are fat-soluble and absorb far better when fat is present. We're 3 items in, and I want to pause for just a moment. If this information is reaching you at a time when it matters, when someone in your family is dealing with this disease, or when you're doing everything you can to protect yourself, please take 5 seconds and hit the like button and subscribe. This channel exists because people like you share this content with people they love. Number 3, green tea, one of the most studied anti-cancer substances on Earth. Here is something that has been studied in clinical trials, population studies, and laboratory models across Asia, Europe, and North America for over 4 decades. Green tea. Researchers at the University of Southern California conducted a study published in the American Journal of Epidemiology that followed over 70,000 Chinese women for 10 years. Women who regularly consumed green tea had a 57% lower risk of colorectal cancer compared to non-drinkers. Other research out of Japan's National Cancer Center followed 90,000 people and found consistent protective associations for stomach, lung, and breast cancer. The active compounds are called catechins, and the most potent of these is EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate. EGCG does something very specific. It interferes with a process called angiogenesis, which is the growth of new blood vessels. Cancer tumors are extraordinarily dependent on growing new blood vessels to feed themselves. EGCG essentially cuts off that supply line. It also has been shown to induce apoptosis. That's the process by which damaged or abnormal cells are directed to self-destruct before they can multiply. I had a patient, Helen, 74, a retired teacher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Helen had a strong family history of stomach cancer. Both her father and her brother had been diagnosed. She came to me after her endoscopy found evidence of chronic atrophic gastritis, a precancerous condition. Among several interventions, we introduced 2 to 3 cups of green tea daily. At her 18-month follow-up endoscopy, her gastroenterologist noted meaningful improvement in the mucosal lining. Helen told me, "I didn't expect something so simple to matter so much." A few practical notes. Loose-leaf green tea generally contains higher concentrations of catechins than bagged tea. Matcha, which is powdered whole green tea leaves, contains roughly 10 to 15 times the catechin concentration of a standard brewed cup. Do not add milk to green tea. Certain proteins in dairy appear to bind to catechins and reduce their bioavailability. Lemon juice, on the other hand, enhances catechin absorption by stabilizing them in the digestive tract. Temperature matters. Brew with water at around 160 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit, just below boiling. Water that is too hot degrades the delicate catechin compounds. Drink 1 cup in the morning with breakfast and 1 mid-afternoon. If you're sensitive to caffeine, decaffeinated green tea retains most of the catechin content. Now we're getting close to the top of our list. What I'm about to share with you has been in the scientific literature for 30 years, and yet almost no one over 60 is doing it consistently. That changes today. Number 2, fermented foods. The cancer gut connection most doctors miss. This is the one that surprised me. Not because I didn't know fermented foods were healthy. I did. But the depth of what researchers have discovered about the connection between the gut microbiome and cancer risk over the past decade has genuinely changed how I think about prevention. Here is the finding that stopped me in my tracks. A study published in the journal Nature Medicine, conducted by researchers at the Stanford School of Medicine, followed 350 adults over a 12-week dietary intervention. Those assigned to a high fermented food diet showed dramatic increases in microbiome diversity and significant decreases in 19 inflammatory proteins, including several directly associated with increased cancer risk, such as interleukin-6 and interleukin-12. Now, why does this matter for cancer? The gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive tract, plays a direct role in regulating immune surveillance. Your immune system depends on signals from gut bacteria to identify and destroy abnormal cells before they can develop into tumors. When the microbiome is diverse and healthy, that surveillance is sharp. When it's depleted, as it often is in people over 50, due to processed food, antibiotics, chronic stress, and reduced dietary variety, that surveillance weakens. Research from the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, which followed 521,000 people across 10 European countries over more than 15 years, found that high consumption of fermented dairy, specifically yogurt, was associated with a 26% lower risk of colorectal cancer. A separate study from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center found that patients with higher gut microbiome diversity had significantly better responses to immunotherapy treatments. Your body's first line of defense against cancer isn't just your immune cells. It's the ecosystem inside your gut. I want to tell you about James, 76, a retired engineer from Austin, Texas. James had been on broad-spectrum antibiotics multiple times over a decade for recurring urinary tract infections, and his gut microbiome was, by lab measurement, severely depleted. He had low energy, frequent digestive issues, and elevated inflammatory markers. We built a structured fermented food protocol into his daily routine: plain Greek yogurt in the morning, kimchi at lunch 2 or 3 times a week, and a small glass of kefir in the evenings. Over 6 months, his inflammatory markers dropped substantially, and at his annual physical, his gastroenterologist noted the healthiest colonoscopy result he'd had in 20 years. James told me, "I thought I was just fixing my digestion. I didn't realize I was rebuilding my whole immune system." Here is what you actually do. The most accessible fermented foods are plain yogurt with live active cultures: kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, and tempeh. Look for the phrase live and active cultures on the label. Avoid versions with high added sugar. Sugar feeds the wrong bacteria. Start small if you're not used to fermented foods. A quarter cup of yogurt, a tablespoon of kimchi. Your gut needs time to adapt. Pair fermented foods with prebiotic fiber, the food that feeds those beneficial bacteria. Garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, and oats are all excellent sources. The two together, probiotic and prebiotic, produce measurably greater microbiome diversity than either one alone. And now we come to number 1. The food at the top of this list is the one that ties every mechanism we've talked about today together. The science behind it is some of the strongest I've seen in 30 years of reviewing cancer research, and the practical steps are simpler than you would ever expect. Number 1, extra virgin olive oil, the most evidence-backed anti-cancer food in human history. I've given lectures at medical institutions across the country. When I tell audiences that a bottle of olive oil sitting on a kitchen counter may be one of the most powerful cancer prevention tools available to the average person, there is always a pause. People expect something exotic, something expensive, something complicated. The evidence says otherwise. A landmark study, the PREDIMED trial, one of the largest dietary intervention studies ever conducted, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, followed nearly 7,500 high-risk adults over 4.5 years. One group was assigned a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil. The researchers found that this group had a 68% reduction in breast cancer incidence compared to the low-fat diet control group. 68%. In a randomized controlled trial, the gold standard of evidence, A separate analysis published in JAMA Internal Medicine, reviewing data from 841,000 participants across 19 countries, found that higher olive oil consumption was associated with a 31% lower risk of cardiovascular death and a significant reduction in all-cause mortality. Researchers at the University of Barcelona found that oleocanthal, one of the key polyphenols in extra virgin olive oil, destroyed cancer cells in as little as 30 minutes in laboratory studies, while leaving healthy cells intact. The mechanism? Oleocanthal ruptures a cellular structure called the lysosome inside cancer cells, releasing enzymes that cause those cells to self-destruct. Think of it this way. Every cancer cell carries within it a sealed compartment filled with digestive enzymes. It's like a tiny sealed bag of acid. Oleocanthal punctures that bag, and the cancer cell destroys itself from the inside. Healthy cells have a different structural composition and are largely unaffected. The exact mechanism isn't fully understood at every level, but the population data and the laboratory data are strikingly consistent. There's more. Extra virgin olive oil is rich in oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat, which has been shown to reduce the expression of an oncogene called HER2/neu, a driver of aggressive breast cancer. Research from Northwestern University found that oleic acid suppressed HER2 activity and increased the effectiveness of cancer medications in laboratory models. I want to tell you about Margaret, 72, a retired schoolteacher from Columbus, Ohio. Margaret's sister had been diagnosed with breast cancer at 69. Margaret came to me frightened, with a strong family history and elevated inflammatory biomarkers. We made several dietary shifts, but the most consistent one was this: 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil every single day, on salads, on vegetables, drizzled over whole grain bread. Over 18 months, her CRP levels, a primary marker of systemic inflammation, dropped from 4.8 to 1.1. Her physician was, in her words, baffled. Margaret told me, "I thought it was too simple to actually work. I kept waiting for a catch." There was no catch. Here is exactly how to do this. 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil per day. That's the dose seen in most of the protective research. The quality of the oil matters considerably. Look for oils labeled extra virgin, bottled in dark glass, with a harvest date rather than just an expiration date. The closer to the harvest date, the higher the polyphenol content. A high-quality olive oil should have a slight peppery bitter finish. That bitterness is the oleocanthal. If your olive oil tastes bland and smooth, it has very little of the active compound. Do not use it for high heat frying. Extra virgin olive oil has a smoke point around 375 to 405 degrees Fahrenheit, after which the polyphenols begin to degrade. Use it as a finishing oil, in dressings, drizzled over cooked vegetables, or for low to medium heat cooking. Pair it with tomatoes. Lycopene, the compound in tomatoes linked to prostate and breast cancer risk reduction, is a fat-soluble antioxidant. It absorbs up to 4 times more efficiently when eaten alongside olive oil than when consumed alone. The combination is not an accident. It's what traditional Mediterranean populations have been eating for thousands of years. I want to leave you with something I mean sincerely. If you are 60, 70, or even 80 years old today, your body still has the capacity to respond to what you put into it. The research I've described involves people your age. The patients I've told you about, Dorothy, Robert, Helen, James, Margaret, were not young. They were not starting over. They were making changes in the second half of their lives and seeing real measurable results. It is never too late. Your cells are not fixed. Your inflammation is not permanent. Your microbiome can be rebuilt. Your DNA is not a verdict. It is a predisposition, and predispositions can be addressed. 5 foods: blueberries, cruciferous vegetables, green tea, fermented foods, extra virgin olive oil. None of them require a prescription. None of them are expensive. All of them are available at any grocery store in any city starting today. I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, which of these 5 foods is already part of your daily routine, and which one surprised you the most? I read every single comment on this channel, and your responses genuinely shape what I make next. If this video helped you, or if you know someone, a parent, a sibling, a friend, who is navigating their health at this stage of life, please share this with them. One conversation at a time, this kind of information reaches the people who need it most. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Because next week, I'm going to show you the single daily habit that research from the Mayo Clinic found reduces cancer recurrence risk by more than 40%. And most people have never heard of it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the comments.